Sabrina 70s comic, issue 14. Della appears to Sabrina in a bad mood, with a cape that's so distracting because it reminds me of Superman immediately. Della complains that the reason Sabrina's nice is because Hilda and Ambrose are permissive parents. Surprisingly, that's kinda true. Della expects me to believe Sabrina hasn't cast a spell in weeks, and she says that talents like witchcraft have to be used, or they decay. I have a hard time believing that. Why is Sabrina wasting time saying so much slang to Della? Della threatens to have them transferred, and after Sabrina says that she'll be a real witch from now on, and Della says she'll be keeping her eye on her, she's asked to stay for lunch, and Sabrina expects me to believe that she's almost forgotten how to cast a spell. She uses magic all the time. Then her family and Della get threatened by a snake and a bunch of monsters because Sabrina was practicing. Della tells her to go play with her friends and forget she's a witch. It would make Sabrina look smart if it was an intentional ploy to get Della to react like this. And the story ends with Sabrina thinking that everyone in the house is happy with her when they're scared instead, making me really wonder why witches want other witches to be evil when it clearly bothered them. So that's all the story was? That was stupid. In the comedy page, Sabrina uses magic to get rid of all the stuff messing up her room, and she reveals that all the junk is in her closet. And it falls out when she opens the door like an idiot. In the next story, Harvey wants to go fishing, while Sabrina wanted to go to the beach today. Is he not allowed to fish at the beach? I guess so. I guess because of fishing restrictions. If this was Harvest Moon, he'd be allowed to fish wherever he wants. Sabrina says that the fish are smelly, and she gets convinced anyways because she gets to be alone with him for a while. Surprisingly open-minded. He tells her that when he's fishing, he doesn't like to be disturbed. Then Sabrina immediately plays music on the radio because she's bored. She says that she has to do something to entertain herself. Can they not both fish? Really? He can't teach her how to fish? I guess because she's a girl in a 70s comic. So that idea never occurred to him. Still, he should have brought a second fishing rod. That was common sense. I thought both of them would be fishing. Harvey was smart enough to bring a book with them for her to read at least. He's not very good with the ladies. She complains that this is the same as being home alone by herself, and she doesn't like the fishing scene at all. What did he expect? Since she wants him to leave the beach by fishing up something he could brag about to his friends, Sabrina summons a giant menacing fish that swallows his pole. Shouldn't she realize his friends would never believe him? I guess Sabrina knows that, and is intentionally messing with them as a relatable revenge. Because she goes on to pretend she didn't notice the fish because he made her read, and he agrees to read a book at the beach instead. And the story ends with them being realistically scared of going into the water after that. In the next story, Sabrina looks backwards and thinks that's sweet. I didn't know what she was talking about at first. What's sweet about a kid daydreaming? I guess she really wants to be a mother. She decides to spy on what he's daydreaming about. Good thing he's not Morty's age or she'd hate it. She finds out he's daydreaming about getting a bunch of ice cream from Pop-Tates. And it's realistic because anyone would do this at least once if they could. She uses magic to make his dream come true. Then he goes home and his mother nags him that he's been stuffing his face again. She feels responsible and decides to go see how he's feeling, and he's sleeping again. So because she's that bored, she spies on his dream and makes a ridiculously reckless, dangerous decision on making his dream come true. So he freaks out and calls for his mom because he's on the plank of a pirate ship. So Sabrina takes off, without any consequences, and says that she should leave people alone for a while. But she won't, because if she actually learned that lesson, it'd make for a very boring comic. In the next story, Harvey asks Sabrina if she wants to swim at the beach, and like earlier on, she just wants to soak up the sun again. While Harvey's more of an active person. A guy grabs Sabrina, insisting on trying to take Sabrina surfing. And it turns out this happens a lot. Harvey tells him off, and the jerk tells him that he's a high school champion boxer and black belt karate expert and uses that as an excuse to be condescending to him. To be fair, I don't see why he'd think Harvey has any kind of merit. He doesn't know Harvey very well. And Sabrina just stands there. Harvey's punch does nothing. So Sabrina sets a long spell to surround Harvey in an invisible shield. First off, the spell should have been in her thought bubble, not out loud where it should reveal that she's a witch. This spell's already making magic obvious without her proving she did it. Second, in all the time she would be taking to say that spell, or think it, that guy would have hit Harvey several times. So her spell should have been in an earlier panel. But I can understand her needing to say a spell to focus enough on a concept that's hard to imagine, because it's an invisible shield. The jerk screams with his fist in pain, and Harvey says he didn't even feel that. Sabrina then recklessly plans on getting a drink of water and leaving him unattended, instead of erasing his memory of what happened. You'd think she'd remember the last 2 times something like this happened, and know he'd get overconfident again. So he asks the kid to punch him. But the story ends with him getting knocked out by a child. And Sabrina tries to look on the bright side, because she said she wanted a quiet day at the beach. It's a good thing the kid apologized. Is it realistic that a kid could knock him out? In the comedy page, Sabrina says that Della gave her the toughest cooking lesson of her life. She had to use a ton of flour, 50 gallons of milk, and 500 pounds of sugar. I was expecting potion ingredients. It turns out she made a gingerbread house. Wouldn't a witch be able to just zap one up in a couple seconds? Why would they waste time with all this? Though it is interesting. She's making a potion, but it's got different ingredients. In the next comedy page, Harvey looks at a 1930s fashion corner and compliments it. So Sabrina uses magic to give him the suit he wanted. She says he'll pick up his allowance and they'll go dancing, but he only got a nickel. So his father was a jerk in this comic too. In the next story, Sabrina feels sorry for Ethel and uses magic to make some guys like her for a 3rd time. And it's at the beach too. Oh, never mind, it's just a comedy page. So the guys just put dirt on her with shovels because Sabrina was using slang when she cast her spell. I didn't know it was a comedy page because the title of the story was in the panel itself. I read on TV tropes that jokes about ugly people have not aged well in the Archie comics. It's not the end of the world to me, but I don't see why it's funny, I just feel sorry for her. Then there's another comedy page where Sabrina wishes she had a pair of platform shoes. I guess she's too ditzy to realize the obvious fact that she just tripped in them or something. She casts a spell telling her soles and heels to grow, instead of just magicking up platform shoes. But they grow uncontrollably, and she somehow doesn't know how to turn off the spell. How'd she screw this up? Wouldn't she have just given herself a copy of the shoes she saw in a second? In the next story, Jughead saves Sabrina from being hit by a car, and it turns out that because of a witch rule, she's allowed to grant him 3 wishes. So there's a rule that a witch can do good deeds for a mortal, but only if they save her life. That's shockingly reasonable of Della. I guess that makes sense, but I'm wondering how it's a thing when the witches in this comic usually look down on magic to help mortals. Sabrina has a smart way of manipulating Jughead into wishing without actually telling him the truth. She wishes she was able to grant him 3 wishes. He wishes that he could eat himself sick. So Sabrina and him are unhappy because getting sick was part of the wish. Jughead says after the fact, that's funny how just as he wished, that guy was closing up and wants to get rid of all of that food. Sabrina suggests he wishes for something soothing for his stomach, and Jughead thinks that dessert would be the answer, which bothers Sabrina, of course. Jughead's reminded me of Chip, but at least he has more than just that as a personality. He's kinda snarky. He'd be more annoying otherwise, so he gets some chocolate chip cookies out of nowhere. Jughead overthinks and wishes that the next wish that pops into his head would be the best wish anyone could wish for. And Sabrina gets ignored as he continues to talk. Isn't it obvious he's wasting his wish right now? He's on his 3rd wish. Can't he count? He wishes that the world would live in peace and happiness and love each other. And it doesn't come true because he wasted his wish earlier. I guess the reason Sabrina didn't make world peace happen a long time ago is that she's already getting hounded by Della for using magic for good deeds. She wouldn't have been allowed to grant his wish for world peace anyways. Too bad. The first story frustrates me for a while, taking too long to remind me that Della wants Sabrina to be evil, but not simply so she could serve at her side will, but because she wants all witches to be like that, which is especially confusing as when Sabrina does abuse her power, Della isn't happy about it. The whole story is about her telling her that she's not using magic enough, which is not in character for Sabrina at all. None of that story would have happened. The second story is about Sabrina being bored on a fishing trip with Harvey because for no explained reason he didn't let her have a fishing rod too, though she would have gotten bored anyways. So she summons a huge fish to convince him to leave for the beach, and it's big enough that he can't reel it in as proof of what happened, which is smart of her. The third story is about Sabrina spying on a kid's daydream and making it real to give him ice cream, and then she stupidly makes his more dangerous dream real and is actually surprised when he's upset. That dream spying was not good of her, but it was also easy to understand. The fourth story is about Sabrina not learning her lesson about casting spells and Harvey, as she makes sure he wins a fight against a jerk trying to force her to surf with him, but then he thinks he's invincible because of her force field and gets himself punched by a kid because he thinks it's still there. Why didn't Sabrina anticipate this and erase his memory of the fight? And it's not a funny ending, so I don't see how making her get SF amnesia is worth repeating this plot point. I don't understand why there's so much slapstick against Harvey. The final story is about Sabrina getting her life saved by Jughead and granting him 3 wishes. But considering how much she likes to use magic to help people, that's her normal behavior anyways. It's interesting that this is a witch rule in general, so he humanizes them. Of course his wishes are extremely predictable, so what was the point? It'd be more interesting if it was anyone but him. Shouldn't it have been immediately obvious to Jughead that he was wasting his last wish? Somehow it makes him incapable of counting to 3. I thought when he said he was gonna fool the system, he was gonna say, "I wish for 3 more wishes."